Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. The following hour of programming represents views and opinions of the world as seen from a scientific perspective. While your own perspective may mesh or differ from those you are about to hear, it makes absolutely no difference to the hosts of the show. In fact, ignoring the opinions of people like you, as well as ignoring the opinions of people unlike you, is the only way in which truths about the world can be discovered. For the greatest obstacle to reality is opinion. The darkest veil in the striptease of science is our mind's ability to make assumptions, our natural tendency to will the world to operate how we would choose it to operate. Yet, as satisfyingly self assuring as a systematic self referencing philosophy may be, there is no substitute for science. While it may work sublimely to control vast populations of human beings, no amount of rhetoric applied to the universe will produce results achievable through scientific reasoning. As an intelligent person, I'm sure you will agree, knowing how reality is really working is better than not knowing. And we think you will find after listening just once that you have no other choice than to tune in again and again to This Week in Science, coming up next.
Music, 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 interlude. And now.
It's not quite the same.
I know, it's not quite the same, right?
Where's my music? Oh
Hey,
my goodness.
Justin! We're live.
Good morning. Wait, it's not even morning. Our whole show's going to be different. Good evening,
know.
Kirsten.
Good evening, Justin. It's great to be seeing you through the wonders of the internet. This is our first show using Skype, broadcasting live from the TWiS network, but our show will continue to be broadcast on KDVS 90.3 FM as well on Tuesday mornings, as it has for the last 10 years. So very excited to be opening up this new morning, new grounds for This Week in Science. It's good, right?
Yeah, instead of coffee, I've got a little spritzer here.
I've got a nice glass of wine. It definitely is not morning.
This is going to be a mellower show, I think, than our usual.
Yeah, but whatever's appropriate, whether it is good morning, whether it's good evening, wherever you are, it's time for science. So let's get started. On this week's show, we have tons of science news. As usual, I brought stories about demoting fruit flies, neuron communication techniques, and deep black smokers. What do you have, Justin?
What do I have? I've got more Australopithecus sedibia. So more on this missing link that was discovered in South Africa, and why brainstorming is bad for ideas, at least in a group.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a bunch of and some other stories that didn't look like they made it through the printer, but this is actually pretty cool. This is the routes in the brain for empathy and for violence seem to be the same.
Might be the same. Well, I want to hear more about that in a little bit. Yeah. But first, the big story for the day: deep black smokers. That's right. Beneath the Caribbean Sea, a remote-controlled vehicle found the world's deepest hydrothermal vents. They sit 5 kilometers, 3.1 miles deep in the Cayman Trough in the Caribbean. And black smokers are interesting. They usually arise in these places in the ocean, on the sea floor, where there's a subduction zone. So where one part of the Earth's crust is going underneath the other part of the Earth's crust, and there's a lot of activity happening, and maybe the heat and the pressure from the activity there, it causes this upwelling of gas and other substances from below the surface of the crust. And so they jet out, and they have these super hot, can melt iron jets of water that shoot out from underneath the crust of the sea and the crust of the earth. And one of the cool things about them is that they're finding that there are these organisms that are adapted to living in these super extreme environments. They're crazy hot, extreme places to live. I like hot tubs, but I don't necessarily want to be in a plasma jet, No. No, not necessarily. So anyway, there's been in the news this week, it's just been a pretty big story because this is the deepest area, the deepest place that these kinds of vents have been found. Previously, they were found about 2.5, about a little more than 4 kilometers underneath the sea surface. And geologist Bramley
And
Merton of the,
for those
yeah,
not familiar with kilometers, 4 kilometers, you're saying?
yeah, it's
Is
about two and
it's
a half
about
miles.
that's about 4,000 meters,
Oh, thanks. Thanks for
just for those.
clarifying that. Yeah, thanks a lot. Geologist Bramley Merton of the National Oceanography Center in Southampton. He was the guy piloting this remote control vehicle that's called the Hibis underwater vehicle. He said it was like wandering across the surface of another world. The rainbow hues of the mineral spires and the fluorescent blues of the microbial mats covering them were like nothing I had ever seen before. So, the interest is that they found these crazy hot, amazing ecological areas deep below the surface of the ocean. And at the same time, they're found in a really interesting place. And this is a point that most of the news stories that were out there didn't really catch. But on Night Science Journalism Tracker, that's out of MIT, Charlie Petit, I think his name's Petit, he actually took a look at this and found that the area where the Cayman Trough used to be, or where it used to be a subduction zone about 30 million or more years ago. So it used to be really active as a subduction zone, but it's not anymore. But now there's a newer rift that's forming that's splitting it. And so this area that you would expect to be, because it's an old geologically active area is now being torn apart by new geologic activity. And so that's where this really interesting collision is coming to play in and creating these deep black smokers. So
Mm.
it's kind of interesting. Yeah. And as Charlie says, he says it's a candy mint and a breath mint. I don't know. I don't know. It's a really
That's
interesting story, I think. Where are these locations on our planet that are so extreme and what's happening there and how does life exist there? These are really neat questions to find out, explore our own planet.
yeah. Yeah, and it's one of the potential epicenters for life. If it isn't panspermia, then areas around the black smokers are another candidate for origin of all life on planet Earth. Hmm.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
We may be
But
descendants of extremophiles.
I like that idea. Yeah. I mean, maybe we didn't need Gore-Tex once upon a time, but What other stories do you have? I think that's an interesting story, but it's time to move on.
There's a new robot being programmed by UC Berkeley researchers that may make manual human folding of clothes a thing of the past. Okay, pretty small step for all robot kind there, but it's actually a pretty neat trick to train a robot to fold clothes. Doesn't seem like it would be the most. I need one to iron my clothes in the first place. Is what I really need.
Yeah, they
So
don't
here's the
have an
story I was
ironing
talking.
robot yet.
Yeah. Just getting one step closer to world robot domination. Folding of clothes. I'm not scared yet. Just,
I'm actually excited. I'm really excited about the
uh,
possibility of robots folding my clothes. I could hire a robot. I got a robot that'll vacuum my floor and a robot that will fold my laundry. We are getting there. We
yeah,
are
yeah.
getting there.
The oh wow, look how great. The clothes folding robot you can get for just around 50 grand right now if you want one at home. Or you can, continue to fold your own clothes like the rest of us poor suckers that don't have our own robot at home. Look how
Yeah, well,
quick that robot was ended up on our show. That's wow, look at how cool that is.
yeah, there's a video out there. We'll have a link to it. There's a video of a robot folding clothes, and the robot folds clothes very nicely. He must have taken a lesson from Martha Stewart. I don't know.
Yeah, it's good
I think that
technique.
he's got good folding technique.
Yeah. Because
Twist, fold,
it's all
twist,
about that
twist,
little
fold.
shake, right? Right there before because anybody can just, Folds something in half. She's getting all the wrinkles out. Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
Is that a
anyway, maybe
ShamWow?
the robots that are coming out in the future,
Look,
maybe
he's
will.
pitching ShamWow now.
That's right. But did you hear also it's not just the clothes folding robots. There was a story I talked about last week or 2 weeks ago where they have the journalist robots. So they actually have robots that are created to go out and record video, to
Mm.
take pictures as well, to search the internet for information, to what else do they do? They can, and then they write the story. At the end of everything, they write a story. They have natural language ability and can write an article. I'm scared.
Wow. Well, maybe we'll finally have an impartial media. No, we'll have somebody programming the robot to throw in things.
Yeah. Yeah, some people in the chat room here are saying that it only folded towels. It didn't fold any shirts or sheets. So the example that we're looking at might not, I mean, it might be useful in a hotel, maybe, to take some of the workload down.
It's going to be
But
complete. Robots are going to be completely useless for folding clothes, but it does show new articulation in manipulation by robots, which is a pretty cool thing. I mean, this is something that an automated factory machine can probably be set up to do this anyway. But it's going around the room, picking out the articles of clothes in sort of a more home-based environment. So it's gonna lend itself to some cool stuff.
yeah, as soon as the price comes down.
For instance, the spritzer bot.
The spritzer bot.
I, where is my spritzer robot? I'm empty. See, no robot.
How do neurons get their say? Moving on from robots taking over the world, we'll move into how your brain actually does stuff. How neurons actually get their point across when there are so many neurons in the brain that are equally trying to get their point across in a different way. Researchers at La Jolla, California, have published in Science magazine a model, a study that looked at modeled activity of over 6,000 neurons or 6,000 synapses acting on a neuron. So, from say a number of different inputs, all coming in from different directions and acting onto one single neuron. Now, this interaction, if you have one-on-one interaction, one neuron, one synapse, that synapse fires, and then it just tells the next neuron, "Hey, that's where we go. That's what we do." But in the process, it's never just one-on-one in the brain. There's so many neurons doing all sorts of stuff and all talking at the same time. So, taking a look at it, they actually measured these neurons, and they found that it's a matter of the neurons speaking up, and that it takes about 30 synapses firing at the same time at minimum to create activation of a neuron. So there has to be coordinated communication of a number of synapses to actually make something happen. And so without coordination, the neurons won't actually get their point across. If there's just like one synapse firing, it's not enough to make anything happen. You add up the number of synapses that are all firing together and going bam, bam, bam all at once, then the chances of something actually occurring down the line is much higher. Researchers say, unfortunately, we don't have the technology yet to actually measure what these neurons are saying to the recipient cell, which would require recording simultaneously from hundreds of cells. For this reason, nobody could answer a very basic question that's been puzzling neuroscientists for decades, which is how many neurons or synapses does it take to reliably send a signal from point A to point B? Um, and there's an interesting question, especially concerning the thalamus, because the thalamus is this control center of the brain. And the thalamus, even though it controls a whole lot of sensory information that gets distributed to different areas of the brain, it doesn't actually account for a very high percentage of the inputs that get there. So it has a big influence, but it's not actually putting a huge signal out to the brain. It only accounts for about 5% of the signals that some cells in the cortex receive. So the researchers say that this is a paradox. How can so few synapses have such a big impact? If the average spiking rate were the determining factor, thalamic input would be drowned out by the other 95% of inputs from other cortical cells. And so, again, to repeat, it only takes about 30 synapses in their model out of 6,000. So it's a really small percentage of the total
Yeah.
synapses that actually have to fire. But they can end up having a huge impact. Um, but again, this is a computer model. It's based on natural conditions. It's not, though, I don't know, they don't know whether or not this is actually how it will work in natural conditions. If this is what's happening in the brain, if you have 30 inputs coming in, if the activation is going to occur in this reliable fashion. And if you have visual input coming into the visual cortex, and it's the same input over and over and over and over again, you would expect it to eventually be like the same behavioral output, but sometimes it's not. So, in terms of real world conditions, this model might not explain everything yet, but it probably gives a very good idea of how things work. But it all deals with coordination, communication, and working together. Gosh darn it.
My mouse is looking a little sad. It's
Your
just
mouse is drooping a little
a
bit.
little drooping.
I don't know. So for people who are not watching the initial broadcast here and are listening to the audio, Justin has decided to be a sock puppet for his appearances on Twit for whatever reasons that Justin has.
New discovery is raising hope that autism may be not only more easily diagnosed, but that the effects of autism may be more reversible than they previously thought. This is a new study appearing online in the what is this journal? FASEB journal. I don't know what that stands for. Scientists have identified a new way to detect the disorder using blood, and have
Mm,
discovered that drugs which affect methylation, the methylation state of genes, could actually reverse autism's effects.
wow.
Huh? Whoa. So it's already being used.
Yeah.
The type of drug is already being used for other purposes and autism related at the moment, but they think there may be some crossover. This is, let's see. This is Valerie Hugh, Biochemistry, Molecular Biology, George Washington University Medical Center in Washington D.C. Since autism is a very diverse array of has a very diverse array of symptoms present in any given individual, it's first necessary to be able to identify specific defects in each individual, deficits in each individual, in order to design and prescribe the best treatment. So, as an example of this personalized approach to medicine, we have identified RORA as one of the genes that was altered specifically in the subgroup of autistic individuals who exhibited severe language deficits. Part of the way they made this discovery is they had twins, and one twin had autism and the other didn't, and
Mm,
that's a very rare two very rare situations together. And so what they could do is they compared the genes that showed changes, but that showed differences between the two through DNA tagging. And methylation was on with a list that showed different levels of expression from these same. Well, they said these same individuals, but these twins. When they
yeah.
when they studied the amount of protein product produced in by two genes that appear on both lists in autistic and control regions of the cerebellum and frontal cortex, the brain, they found that both proteins, as predicted by the observed increase in DNA tagging, were reduced in the autistic brain. This is suggesting that blocking the chemical tagging of these genes may actually reverse symptoms of the disorder. So
That's
this
amazing.
is a pretty yeah.
But I
That's
mean, this is just finding the genes. They're aware of what the genes are now. The place they it's theoretical that if they block this stuff that it'll reverse autism, right? It's just
mm,
theoretical at this point.
And reversing it's reversing some of the deficits, some of the symptoms, not the complete picture yet. No.
Right. Well, I mean, you also look at it, autism is a spectrum disorder as well. So one person that has extreme autism may not have the same genetic profile as somebody who's has lesser symptoms of autism, right? So it's that there may be
I
a
wouldn't even go lesser. I would go
continuum.
the other direction and say there's the what's could be considered high functioning autism, which is a lot of people who can be doctors and a lot of computer programmers. I think it's part of the reason that they've speculated why there's such a higher uptick of autism in the Palo Alto region, which it may be related to people who are very drawn to technology and to working with computers, maybe the
Right.
high functioning autistic types, which is doesn't show anything in their outward. I mean, they're completely functional and more functional in some ways than your average brain, but they also would tend to be a family in which autism was running in the other direction as well. So
Right.
yeah, who knows? Maybe this discovery will make people who are really good at handling technology really poor at it. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? And there's still the question with autism, like you're mentioning people in certain pockets, different areas like Palo Alto or the Marin Headlands. That those areas, there seems to be a a larger percentage than the general population, and maybe those people are maybe people self-select in a certain way for areas that seem to be, easier for them, or that whatever they're good at, say being analytical, that they self-select for certain areas. And then more recently as well, we're starting to diagnose autism as more often than we used to. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that was one of the things about like the spike in Palo Alto, right? Is it because this idea that there's a lot of high functioning autistics who are drawn to the tech industry, who are really good at handling that sort of information, and that's why they're there, and that's why the uptick is because it's in that gene pool to a greater degree. Is
Mm.
there a higher level of education in the Palo Alto area? And is it making it so that parents are more apt to be looking out for and diagnosing, more borderline cases of autism? Are they more aware of it? Is there better healthcare so there's more access to doctors who are finding kids who might have been considered having some other just having a behavior problem, if not for having proper medical coverage and an educated parent. Yeah, so it's all the data's jacked up.
We need better data analysis. That's what we need. There's a lot of data points out there, more complete analysis. But along those lines of complete analysis and taking a look at everything that's out there, taking us back a couple of years back in time, actually, there was a guy named Dr. Garrett Lisi, the surfer physicist, who said had figured out the theory of everything
Dude,
based
it's
on.
all totally simple. Oh, it's just so uncomplicated, man. It's just
I don't know why I think it's so. Why all of a sudden I was getting a French accent there? That's weird. Anyway, no accents for me. Um, So he put out a preprint in Archive, and archive.org is this place where physicists in the physicist community, they put their ideas out, and they're considered preprints because then people in the general community can respond to them and let them know how they feel, not how they feel, but whether they can analyze what their ideas are and basically make them a better paper. So eventually they come out with a real published paper after it's gone through a few more iterations. And so he came out, he proposed that there was that the four forces of nature could be unified and described within a complicated mathematical group called the symmetry group E8. And there are a number of different symmetry groups that are mathematically described, and they um, help us to understand space in our universe and how things fit together. So anyway, someone else came out just recently with a new response, and they say, meh, thumbs down. You don't win, Garrett Lisi. You lose. Great idea, good thing, nice to propose it, but yeah, it's not that simple. It's really not that simple, unfortunately, because wouldn't it be nice to have everything explained really simply? Wouldn't it be nice to have the story be that a surfer physicist dropped out of academia, just decided he just thought about stuff a lot and came up with a great idea that nobody else could come up with? It would just make a great story, right? But yeah, not so much.
Yeah,
So anyway,
it's
yeah,
totally simple.
totally simple. Anyway,
It's just math, man. It's just all it is, man. It's just math.
it is just math. Uh, but anyway, they say that there's a new paper which is also available as a preprint through archive.org, and there are several criteria, three key criteria that a pair of subgroups on a Lie group, or these symmetry groups, the E8 group being one of them, must have in order to be a theory of everything that will explain everything. Let's see, what do we have here? So the first is a trivial restriction that has to hold true between the chosen subgroups. And it's a purely mathematical restriction. The second is that the model cannot contain any exotic higher order spin particles. And the final issue is that the gauge theory employed in our group must be a chiral, a limitation, which is handedness. Chirality means handedness. So we don't have a well-balanced universe because most matter has one chirality over the other. And this is a limitation that's dictated by the existing standard model. So it can't be completely, I guess, symmetrical. It has to have some kind of handedness. And so they've also it was proposed that the 248 dimensions of E8 corresponded to specific particles. And so that you could actually describe specific particles showing up in this E8 symmetric mathematical description. And there's a nice picture of it. There are many different each point is described mathematically through the calculation of this system. But it turns out that there just isn't enough room in the E8 model to actually have as many things in it as need to be for the theory of everything. It's a little,
Right,
it
because
doesn't.
if we go back to that photo real quick of the last one that was up there, I don't know if we can come back. Yeah, you can obviously see there's not going to be enough room for all the asteroids. I mean, you got way too many ships in there. I mean, they're going to be shooting each other, thrusting past you. I mean, how are you going to fit it? There's going to be nothing to shoot at with that many ships in there.
Are you returning to a day of Atari? Some
That's
basic video
pre-Atari, baby.
games.
That's asteroids.
Asteroids, that's right.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the early 70s. Let's take the kids to the bar, give them a couple quarters and send them to the corner. And pick them up when you're done.
that's right. Anyway, I wanna thank Ars Technica. John Timmer, I believe, wrote that article. Ars Technica has some great news out there. So thanks for letting us know what's going on with Garrett and the theory of everything.
All right. Should we go to the break?
Yeah, I think it's about time
now?
for a break. We do have a break today. Take a break today. That's right. This is This Week in Science, and we will be back in just one moment with more science news. Stay tuned.
Like, what's with the hard hats? Is that really necessary?
The Higgs boson it's a dangerous particle. You know that, right?
I guess so.
It could fall on your head like a ton of bricks.
Yeah,
and
it's got all that mass.
Maybe just pass right through and not interact with anything. I don't know. Where my Higgs at? Where my Higgs at? This is This Week in Science. I'm done with it. Okay.
Looking for your Higgs. It's going to be a while.
I'm looking for my Higgs. Looking for my Higgs. Got some science. All right, everyone. We're back. We are back with This Week in Science. That's what you're watching right now. We've got science, science, science. more fun. Justin, you have any stories over there in your edge of the world?
Yeah. I got something here. This is about getting together with your coworkers.
Huh?
You have the meeting. Let's all get
That's
together. We're gonna put our heads together. We're gonna figure some stuff out.
Okay, that kind of getting together. Usually it's not a good idea to commingle with your coworkers too much.
No. I'm not talking about like after work. Or, I'm talking like at work. After work, they're not your workers, your coworkers anymore. They're just people.
Right.
Okay, so this people do this all the time. They get together. They're looking to get the fresh perspective on the project, and they turn to brainstorming. They go up there on the whiteboard. We're gonna put some ideas up here. Everybody, just give me your ideas. We'll put them on the board, and we'll see what shakes loose. A current study from Applied Cognitive Psychology is suggesting that this may not be the best route to generate unique and varied ideas, and actually may be counterproductive. Researchers from Texas A&M University show that group brainstorming exercises can lead to fixation on only one idea or possibility, blocking out other ideas and possibilities, and leading eventually to a conformity of this one idea. The lead researcher, Nicholas Cohn, is explaining fixation to other people's ideas can occur unconsciously and lead to you suggesting ideas that mimic your brainstorming partners as opposed to coming up with new ideas, essentially. So researchers used AOL Instant Messenger as their electronic discussion format when conducting the experiments, which included groups of 2, 3, and 4 subjects. The study and other studies have also shown that taking a break, allowing people to, sort of take in the ideas for a little while and then come back, can stem the natural decline in the quantity and the variety of the ideas. And
wow. So there's something about brainstorming that leads. It just leads to groupthink. You have peer pressure. You have some people who maybe have a certain amount of personal reputation score, whatever, within the group, who maybe thinks one idea is good. And then you say, oh, I like that idea too, because you want to get in with that person.
Or that person's a friend of yours and you want to back them up on their lousy idea just so they don't lose face at the meeting. Or it's your boss and your boss is like, well, I'm thinking balloons. If we put balloons everywhere in the office, it'll raise everybody's spirits. We'll just everybody want to be at work more because there'll be balloons everywhere. It's like, yes, absolutely, sir. That's brilliant. Fantastic.
I love this idea. Let's also have hamburgers at lunch.
No, I guess I don't know how else you would really, if you're really trying to get ideas, I guess you'd have to get them individually submitted and then look at them later, maybe anonymously even.
That would, maybe. I wonder how the study would turn out if they were to compare it, go take this angle of the open brainstorming where everyone's in the same room talking at the same time, getting those ideas out there, versus people coming up with ideas privately and submitting ideas anonymously, and see what, if there's a voting on what ideas people think are the best, how that ends up coming out, and if there's a difference in what ideas come to the front.
I would vote for nap time.
Nap time. I don't know. If there are any psychology grad students out there, this might be something that's good for a study. I think could be good. In more psychology news.
Don't put me in space. I don't want to go. Wait,
that was a groupthink moment. Brainstorming, putting the monkey in space. Moving on. Super taskers walk among us. They might be right beside you, and you might not know. How do you know? We don't know.
Right.
Well, researchers, what were you going to say?
We can test them. I know who you're talking about, too. I've seen these people.
So what they looked at are the ability of people to multitask. And the truth is, the majority of people fail miserably at attention, tests of attention or focus, and then memory. So get people doing a bunch of things and then test them for their memory of whatever it was they did later. And most people fail miserably. If you're going to take a test, it's really good to focus. clear away the distractions because you probably are not a supertasker. You are probably not a good multitasker. They found, based on their study, that it was only about 1 in 40 people is a supertasker, but in their ability of being a supertasker, they did perform much better in tests of memory, attention, and focus. So the next question that these researchers are looking at, it's not the question of whether or not these people are just better at talking on the phone while they're driving, which most people just probably aren't. But what they're interested in doing next is taking a look at whether or not people with certain abilities actually self-select for certain professions. So say people in the Air Force that are pilots, are they supertaskers? And did they end up there, by choice? Did they end up there because their abilities as supertaskers allowed them to be able to do better and excel in those certain areas?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there could be a reason why we are sitting here and talking on these microphones right now, Justin. We could have self-selected this.
Well, no, I mean, I think that everybody ultimately ends up doing a lot of things that they love, even if it's not completely clear why they do them.
Sure, absolutely. I find the idea of supertaskers really interesting, whether or not I think most people would like to believe that they're supertaskers, and in our modern age with email and social media,
they should get like a sticker, like on for the car.
I'm a supertasker.
So, if you get like the hybrid cars, they get to use the carpooling. You get the multitasker. You go in there, you get tested, you pass the multitasker test, and so then you get a little sticker you can put on the back of your car. So when the cops see you texting and having the phone in the other hand and texting on the other while driving with your elbows, they can go, oh no, well, I guess they're legal. They got a permit. They're a multitasker. They can do it. What do you think?
It's certified. I'm certified. I'm a certified supertasker.
I'm a certified supertasker. I can actually knock on my phone and text while driving, and it actually does not make me a worse driver.
Sure.
I'm not saying, no, I'm not actually saying no. Me, not me. No, I.
You have
I hear
to
the phone ringing.
Text,
I start
pull over.
Swerving lanes.
Yeah, there was an interesting headline there that was just brought up in our video feed. I think it's young people think they're better at using the cell phone while driving, or actually they do a little better than older people. Maybe, I don't know.
Oh.
I wonder. The young brain is a little more distractible, a little less experienced than the older brain, and there is something to be said for age and experience in terms of cognitive function. So I wonder if there is, here, young cell phone users drive like the elderly. This is from a 2005 study. Wow. So that's pretty debilitating, I guess. Yeah. There we go. Young drivers are not any better than older drivers.
What that means is we just passed a law that effectively said that it was illegal for the elderly to drive.
Oh, that's really funny. That's right. The cell phone
use is so dangerous that there's a law against it. Then no elderly people should drive. Right? All things being equal, they should take them off the road.
Take it to its logical end. There you go. What else do you have? Do you have any more stories?
Oh, sure. I've got the big one. This is a story that's going to come out in increments because there's more of it going to be revealed. And I feel like we could wait 10 years and then like really do an in-depth on this story. But are you ready for a new species?
Yeah, please.
Fossilized remains of Australopithecus sediba is estimated around 2 million years and is quite possibly the missing link. Or
really?
Maybe just one of the...
Isn't this becoming it's kind of controversial issue right now, right? It always is, but there's the discovery and this could be the missing link. This could be the precursor to man, or it's not.
Well, you know what I'm waiting for is any one of these really old fossils. I mean, there's a chance it could be the precursor of Neanderthal. It could be the precursor of the Homo florensis now. It could be a precursor of, a human that isn't, that didn't lead to us, except except for where they found this, except for some other things. Okay, so this is actually a pretty remarkable find because it's bigger than I thought. I thought they had found one child at this point, but it sounds like now that they have assembled adult male, adult female, and a young male. So they have 3 very well complete fossils, and it looks like they're working on digging up another 2 at the moment. And this is being placed between Australopithecus africanus, which was the sort of more ape-like, really, really old ancestor. And it's also got traits that are much more similar to modern humans, or at least the early modern humans, such as like Lucy and Turkana So this is right in between there. It's let's see, the ape species have long arms and extremely small skulls, but they also have short, powerful hands. And but this like the apes, this species that they found have the long arms, they have the really small skulls, but they also have short, powerful hands, our advanced pelvis, and long legs. So they say that this may have made them capable of not just walking, but perhaps even running. Very human characteristics. Facial features, more similar to the modern day humans than the Australopithecus africanus, because it's got a much more modern nose and our smaller teeth. So it's there's this window back in those millions of years ago of about 100,000 years or so where they haven't had any good records to sort of compare our history to. And it looks like this is a pretty amazing find here. 3 complete fossils, 2 more on the way. And this entire discovery was it made by a researcher?
It was made by a kid, right?
It was made by his son. They were on the field, and the 9-year-old took a hike and said, "Oh, I found a fossil! I found a fossil!" And they're like, "All right, what do you got?"
What do you got, kid? Yeah.
And like, wow, one of the biggest finds possible there.
That's pretty cool. I love that the child is the one who's getting the credit too. Isn't that great? I mean, the experiences that the father, as a paleontologist, as somebody who's going out in the field and doing this work, he's taking his son out there, and his son's learning in the field, learning the trade, learning the science, and is able to make such a potentially impactful discovery. I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. Sediba is Australopithecus Sediba. Keep your ears tuned. We're going to be hearing a lot more about this over the next weeks and months. And
is this the same? Is this the same ancestor that the same specimen that they found that they tested it with basically like MRI? They did magnetic X-ray scanning. They used a synchrotron to shoot X-rays at it. So the synchrotron is like spinning particles around at super high speeds, and like these X-rays shoot off, and they can harvest the X-rays and use them to image, get to dig deeply into structures like your head and be able to image what's in there. And so they ended up looking at this one specimen, and they found that it had brain tissue inside of it. So they think they might have soft tissue inside the skull. And this is the big thing, is that if it's soft tissue, and if there's any softness preserved and it's not completely hard and dry, then that means they could potentially have DNA that they could sample and be able to get genetic evidence of lineage.
Wow. Which, even if it is hardened, they still, there are a couple techniques that they have that if it was preserved well enough, they still might be able to suss out the soft tissue from that, I guess you would say. But they're doing a facial recreation. Recreation, not even reconstruction, which they believe will be available pretty soon. We'll get to look at this new species and see how similar to us it might be. I guess they were falling down. I think they went down some sort of crevice, is how these fossils got preserved so well. So the part of the problem there, though, is they might not. That's part of the difficulty in dating them. They've had to use dating techniques that are separate from the ground around them.
Right, from the geological evidence. So it being a crevice, that means that things could have buckled
They,
and gotten
right.
underneath, been dug underneath other things. And so where
That or
usually
they
if you
fell
have
down a crevice that put them another 10 million years back in time.
right,
or
where
so
normally you have the
geologically.
ground normally you have the ground layering one layer year after year after year over the ground below it. You know,
Right.
if a crevice or some kind of if some geological like an earthquake or some kind of occurrence happens, then you have the possibility of, yeah, it's suddenly dated at 20,000 years where it should be 10,000 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is cool. I think I love these new studies and taking a look at these studies and they're classifying. I just wonder, does it say when they actually discovered these fossils? Because it's pretty standard for researchers to sit on them for a while to make sure that they actually know more information, like where they're coming from, and can place them within a lineage somewhere.
Yeah, but I think we're at a time though. Geez, we gotta, we don't want them getting sat on too long. We've had too many of our really nice discoveries in this just the last 5 years. New dinosaur finds, new whales, new humans are being discovered from these ancient dusty boxes and back rooms of universities where they either didn't get around to identifying or didn't finish placing them somewhere properly.
Right.
Put it out there. Put it out there, make it really public, and you can put your speculation on it as long as you're clear that you're speculating, and you can say what you think it is, and then let it get hashed out. I think they did a wonderful job actually with Homo florensis. There was so much.
So much
It was
controversy in
it
that.
was staged
Yeah.
as controversy, but it wasn't controversy. It was discussion, and people disagreed. And there's no controversy in disagreement. I mean,
No, that's true.
that's how these things get done. Is that you let as many experts in the field go in there, talk about it, have their point of view, disagree vehemently, and after a couple of years went by, people started switching sides. People started figuring out where they needed to look to focus on it. New fossils were even discovered to be thrown in and add information to it. And in the end, we have a much clearer picture of what went on, as opposed to if we were still waiting from the researchers who'd found it to finish analyzing it themselves. I don't think we would have gotten as much done.
Yeah. So maybe there is a certain amount of transparency that needs to be pushed out there into the paleontological world. Let it get it out there. Get your data out there. This is a movement in science. Let's get it out there. Yeah. Like memristers. Memristers are back. I love memristers. Memristers are a new circuit. They were predicted to exist years and years and years ago, back in the 70s, but it was only a prediction. So you have transistors, you have resistors, and what am I forgetting? The other one that capacitors. So transistors, resistors, capacitors, and a fourth type of circuit element was predicted, but they never found it until a few years ago. They called it the memristor. And at a lab in HP, Hewlett Packard, was doing work, and a researcher actually figured out technically how they could be created. And so ever since then, now that we know that they actually could potentially exist, let's figure out how we can make them and what we can do with them. So new news just out that there is a group continuing to work on these memristors still at HP. And they, in their latest work, they found that it's possible, and it might not sound exciting, the big boom, this is what we can do. They can perform a full set of logic operations at the same time as they function as a non-volatile memory. What?
Huh?
What? Yeah, so it doesn't sound exciting, but in the case of getting them to be operational components in circuits, you need them to perform logic operations and or not operations. And you also need, what we want them to do is function as this non-volatile memory, or they call it, where the idea is that you could use a memristor in your computer. And right now you have to go through this whole turning off process and the boot up and the boot off process where it actually stores stuff to memory and like keeps a charge in it so that it'll be there when you turn your computer back on, right? You don't want to turn your computer off, have the electricity leave the system, and then have all your data gone, right?
Right.
So what they want these memristors to be good for is to act as memory that's non-volatile, meaning that it will not be affected by you turning off the computer. So you could actually have a computer that doesn't go through a boot up procedure.
Instant off, instant on. Do you know what that would?
Yeah.
Just in the United States alone, that would take out the carbon emissions worth of energy being used if just when we turned off our, when it went into sleep mode, it actually turned everything off. I think it removes 4 major cities, like the size of Detroit, from our carbon imprint of cars worth of something silly like that. Anyway, it's quite a bit of energy that actually, if you add it all up, equals probably one coal-powered plant per year.
Yeah, it's really substantial. And so these memristors could have a serious impact on technology as we move forward, which I'm really excited about. I love memristors. Do you have another story?
Well, I could do this. This is a study that published in the most recent issue of Revista de Neurologia. In case you haven't been keeping up there, concludes that the prefrontal and temporal cortex, the amygdala, and other features of the limbic system, such as insulin and cingulated cortex, play a fundamental role in all situations in which empathy appears. These parts of the brain also overlap in a surprising way with those that regulate aggression and violence. As a result, the scientific team is arguing that the cerebral circuits for both empathy and violence could be similar, which may explain why you don't have and it may be something along the lines of, if your system is being wired towards having empathy for others, the circuits that would be used to deregulate you into a violent person are already being used, and thus you cannot become a violent person. Is that part of your brain is already, you're already wired towards empathy. Or if you've been trained on violence, been violent, are a violent person, had a violent upbringing, you may not be capable at that point of turning those same circuits into the empathy. Or the reason is because it sort of would be. If you think about how many of these serial killers were pretty cold about it in the end, maybe it is one of these things where, because we've never seen a very empathetic serial killer. Josh, I just felt really bad every time I did it. It must have been terrifying for them. You just don't.
That's not the personality trait that you really consider for somebody who's.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of It's just sort of an interesting idea. They did some simulations of neural circuits that. I guess it led him to this conclusion, but not very many empathetic serial killers, and not or the other way around is not very,
If you're highly empathetic,
you're like Mother Teresa having a really wicked, violent side, just snapping.
Oh my gosh. There's another study that was really similar to this, looking at kids and their. Or just people, but they looked at kids that had a syndrome that makes them not fearful. I think it's called Williams syndrome. I think that's what it's called. And it makes them unable to feel fear. And this can be really bad for a person, because you could get yourself, because you're just so willing to help people. You just want to help people. But at the same time, you're not on the lookout for people who might be wanting to hurt you in some way. So it makes these people more likely to end up maybe getting raped or being a victim of some kind of crime. But they tested this group of kids against normal kids on how they reacted to people, to faces of different races, of different racial profiles. So they had them look at white faces, they had them look at black faces, they had them look at Asian faces. And normal as in not diagnosed with this syndrome children actually were fearful, and if they were asked to find, say who's the bad person or who's done something wrong, they're more likely to point to the face that is not like their own race. But these kids with this syndrome that makes them less fearful, they don't. And they're about even at choosing which face they point at. And so there's potentially a link here between the amygdala and the fear center of our brain that is somehow not learned, or maybe
This syndrome, this fearlessness does have to exhibit in other ways. It's just not that we found some unracist kids and are trying to figure out what's wrong with them.
No, like I said, they're not fearful. They don't.
Other than like
they don't have a self-preservation instinct. Okay, they don't work on protecting themselves. They're afraid. They're not afraid. They're not afraid of any other people. They don't recognize it. They don't recognize what they should be afraid of. Yeah. But then tested on the difference between boys and girls, they performed the exact same as the kids without the disorder. So this comes down to some kind of a something that we learned somehow, but that could potentially, we could figure it if we figure out how some people don't fear other races. Maybe this could come back in a way that we could use, because basically it's ingrained in us to not trust people who are different from our social group. And if we can get past that, it might help society an awful lot. So it's neat that they're looking at the science of it. Yeah.
Cool. I think I'm pretty much tapped. They had some other stories about some stuff, but it's not as good. And we're
all right. So I have one quick story here. Another Ars Technica. There was a comment on the poor fruit fly, Drosophila. This poor little fruit fly is going to be potentially losing its genus. It's going to be demoted. Genetic studies, the fruit fly is a cornerstone of modern genetics and behavioral studies, and it's been used for over a century. Like, it's been used for over 100 years. It contains a number of Drosophila melanogaster has the Drosophila genus contains Drosophila melanogaster, which is the fruit fly that we use for a lot of these studies. But people finally looked really closely at molecular genetic data, and they're saying maybe it doesn't belong in the Drosophila genus. And so there's this big hubbub right now about renaming the poor lab fruit fly. First, yeah, and Ars Technica was great. They they said first goes Pluto, now the poor fruit fly losing its categorization. It's hilarious. Let's see. So listeners sent in some cool stuff. Dave Morgan from Berkeley sent in a story about UC Berkeley researchers that have developed software. Oh, this is your story. Never mind. Thanks, Dave Morgan from Berkeley, for sending in the towel folding story. Mm-hmm. There was another story sent in by Dale, our loyal minion from Niles, Michigan. He sent in a story about Japanese gut bacteria. They looked at the gut flora of Japanese people versus people here in America, and the profile is completely different. They have different bacteria that are especially good at digesting seaweed.
Oh, right. But, that's actually one of the stories that didn't make it in here, which is we may actually be getting more bacteria from our food than that are staying with us and being beneficial. So those bacteria that are digesting sushi and seaweed better probably came from the seaweed at some point.
At some point, that's possible. Right.
Probably came from food that they ate that contributed to the being able to digest what it is they were eating right then. It may have already been eating it and may actually have thrived in our. So there's some possibility that we've been borrowing our microflora from what it is we eat, which
we've been borrowing bacteria from everywhere forever. Yeah. We are bacteria. Yeah. Those of you who think we're not bacteria, give it up. We are
mostly bacteria. If you just look at the raw numbers of DNA, that's mostly what we are made of.
Yeah. Time for a little minion mailbag really fast.
Yeah.
In a recent podcast, this is from James Anderson. He says, "May your wombats run free and unfettered." In a recent podcast, you asked whether or not your minions perceived smell in their dreams. I have a slightly different experience. I live in a family who suffer from osmosis. I rejoice in the pleasure of anosmia. So, in case you were wondering, they cannot.
Huh?
They can smell. I cannot. Osmosis means you can smell. Anosmia cannot. Not having the sense of smell. Having asked each of them, only one of them definitely remembered smell being a part of their dreaming experience. But even then, it was not a strongly, consistently part of her dreaming experience. Obviously, smell is not any part of my experience as I've had anosmia from birth. More precisely, I have no memory of ever being able to smell. So your question poses some interesting corollaries. Do blind or deaf people dream with visual or audible components? And 2, what stage of brain development is required to have taken place in order for dreams to be able to use that sense in dreaming? I'm sure there are others, but these 2 will do for now. I think they're some interesting questions for thought. I don't know the answers to those, but very interesting. Yeah.
If you ever have a chance, if Armenian ever has a chance, just don't do any sort of treatment to help you get that sense of smell. You don't want to give it back right away. People are horribly stinky. The world is full of vulgar smells. It's hideous. It's not like you can just like look away. It's not like the other senses where you don't have to touch something, where you can just look the other way, where you can,
Okay, let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up on next week's show. There's more science news, everybody. But in the meantime, we've got Global Astronomy Month coming up. Well, actually, we're right in the middle of it. And Global Astronomy Month is bringing the world together longitudinally over 30 nights of star peace. So they've divided the world up to longitudinal segments, and are going around the planet very, very day by day, bringing us all together. So April 13th to 15th will cover Western Europe, including the UK, and Star Peace will make it to the east coast of the USA and Canada on April 16th, finally making it to the West Coast here in California on April 22nd. And of course, you can follow the whole thing via Twitter if you're interested. And they're at GAM_2010. You can also look for the hashtag #GAM2010 or take a look for them in Facebook. And the TWIS Book Club is reading Collider by Paul Halpern this month. And you can join in the reading and the fun by going to twisbookclub.ning.com and hopefully join in some conversations about the collider. Right now, we have the Large Hadron Collider doing some amazing work. It's smashing particles together with more force than has ever happened since the Big Bang, or so we think. And yeah, I think that's about it. Justin, what do you have to say?
If you learned anything from today's show.
Yeah, but you're forgetting a whole bunch of other stuff there.
Oh, yeah. You can send us an email. We're at Justin@thisweekinscience.com or Kirsten@thisweekinscience.com. Put TWIS somewhere in the subject matter. Otherwise, you will get spam filtered into oblivion. Please send us suggestions for people you'd want us to interview, for stories. Send us stories, insider stock tips, dreams you had in the recent nights, even if they didn't include smell. Haiku. We love haiku.
Yeah. Science haikus. Yeah, and we hope that you enjoyed the show.
Around the Twitter thing.
The Twitter thing.
At Dr. Kiki.
That's right. Thanks everyone for listening.
But don't try to friend Kirsten on Facebook because she's like.
You can look for me in my fan page. I have a Facebook fan page.
Boring.
My Facebook page is for friends only, but the fan page is for everybody else. So anyway, thanks everyone for listening. We really hope that you enjoyed the show. TWIS is available as a podcast, audio form only right now. You can go to our website, which is www.twis.org, and click on subscribe to the TWIS podcast for information on how to subscribe, or just search for This Week in Science in iTunes. And we'll be back next week, and we hope you'll join us for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from today's show, remember,
it's all in your head. And that's it. One show out.